Hi everybody, hello and welcome. I hope you guys are doing very well. This is going to be kind of a hard video to film just because the size of this plant. But I'm going to make a quick little introductory video on Cymbidium orchids because they're absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, incredible, large, stunning. I got nothing but good things to say about these guys. So these are also called boat orchids. So just to give you some scale and kind of to describe just how incredibly big Cymbidium orchids are. Here you are. They have really long strappy leaves. They're really beautiful inflorescences. This particular variety is in the Red Beauty series. I believe it's called Carmen or Sleeping Carmen. Just going to give you guys a little bit more of a close-up here. I mean, these blooms are incredible. Boat orchids or cymbidiums are some of the largest orchids to exist. They're a huge section of the orchid family. There's so many different cultivars to choose from. Some are fragrant, some are not fragrant. This particular one has a very mild fragrance, but really not super noticeable. And as you can see, they have these beautiful strappy leaves that can be a meter long. They have this really beautiful parallel venation. They look almost kind of like an amaryllis or a clivia more so than a generic orchid. But these guys are semi-terrestrial, and they're also sympodial. So I'll get into what that means in a sec. So yeah, Cymbidium orchids are sympodial, meaning that they're not monopodial. Monopodial orchids always produce leaves in pairs that come from a middle point. Think Phalaenopsis or Vanda orchids, for example. These ones, very much so like Oncidium orchids, are sympodial. So they have growths, and they have a direction of growth. So this is what we call a pseudobulb. It's essentially a storage structure. You want to leave this on for as long as possible because this feeds the next fan. So the fans come from the newer pseudobulb structure. So this is what I mean by a fan. I don't know if you can see, it's the next one coming out. It'll probably bloom pretty soon. You're going to want to let these live out for 1 to 2 years before they produce a blooming stalk. And then you got another fan here, which produces this beautiful inflorescence. Once they finish blooming, this individual fan will die back. It'll dry out, it'll become like this. You're going to want to cut it right above that pseudobulb enlargement point and give your orchid a really nice summer outside. So I want to show you what the new growth looks like in contrast. This over here is a new vegetative growth. You'll notice that Cymbidium orchids like to take on one direction of growth. When they get mature, sometimes they'll deviate into several directions, but for the most part, when they're more juvenile, you'll get them kind of growing in one direction. So Cymbidium orchid growths and inflorescences always come from the bottom of the orchid. You're going to look for them at the base. The vegetative shoots are typically a little bit wider and a little bit less cone-shaped than the bloom stalks, but really you got to wait until the bloom stalks are about 4 inches tall or so to determine if they're going to bloom or if they're going to be vegetative. Because sometimes what'll happen is you'll get a mature pseudobulb and it'll form a bloom stalk right next to it rather than blooming from the actual pseudobulb. So you can kind of, just a little bit kind of see that here. This spotting is very normal on orchids. You'll find this on a lot of cattleyas, Leliocattleas, and Cymbidiums. It's normal, they just kind of develop that as they age. This is what I was saying earlier about being semi-terrestrial. So this likes a finer mix than, say, a Phalaenopsis orchid. It, of course, like all orchids, requires good aeration in its roots, but it's okay being in a thicker mix. You know, it's more accustomed to semi-soils and soil-like mediums like cocoa coires and similar. So just to step back to give you a little bit more scale on this thing, they are very big. There are 2 different classifications of Cymbidium orchids. You have standards, which is what this one is here, and then you have miniatures. Miniatures get to about half the size. The flowers are about half the size. They tend to be a little bit more fragrant, and they can bloom at higher temperatures than these guys, the standard Cymbidiums. So Cymbidiums are cool night bloomers. So what this means is if there's a difference of about 7 degrees Celsius plus between the day and night temperature, and your nighttime temperatures are hovering around 8 to 12 degrees or so, they'll initiate flower spikes. They don't bloom in warmer temperatures, but the miniature varieties will bloom at slightly higher temperatures. But they're definitely a cool season grower. sorry, cool season bloomer. They put on big fans and they get all vegetative and huge and lush in the summer months. And then you're going to want to take them inside and initiate flowering close to a window or a place in the house that gets a little bit cooler in about November. And these are very long lasting blooms. So cymbidiums or boat orchids are quite famous in the orchid world for having very long lasting blooms. On many of the varieties, you'll have bloom spikes for upwards of 5 weeks. Like, it's incredible. This one here has been blooming for me for, oh, I want to say like 3.5 weeks. They're really quite incredible that way. Now, a little bit of a consideration with cymbidiums. Cymbidiums can handle shade. They definitely can. And they will handle full sun, but they prefer kind of dappled in between because they do have a proclivity for burning if you keep them in full blistering sun. And they're just not going to bloom quite as well because the pseudobulbs are not going to beef up enough for you if you have them in full shade. So kind of in between dappled shade is perfect for these guys. If you put them outdoors for the summer, I would recommend only doing so when your nighttime temperatures are about 10 degrees Celsius or so, just to be on the safe side, because I will also warn you, these guys are expensive. They're an investment. They're very long-lived orchids. It's quite common to see them living 80 plus years. They're kind of an heirloomy kind of generational orchid, definitely. So as far as propagation goes, if you're going to separate your cymbidium, these don't do very well as single pseudobulbs. The rule of thumb for cymbidiums is to have at least 3 pseudobulbs, unless you're desperate and trying to save a part of the plant because part of it rotted. Go for at least 3 mature pseudobulbs. So I would count this as 1. I would count this one as 1 because, believe it or not, this is still alive. It's still orangey green in the inside. And I would count this one as 1. This would be like 1 division. They're the kind of orchid that really accelerates its growth pattern as it gets mature, as it grows. You'll notice that these can really rapidly fill pots, and their growth period is just really accelerated as they get older. They're a little slow to kick off, but I mean, just trust the process because wow, they grow like crazy when they're established. This isn't even as long as the strappy leaves get. These guys can get like over a meter long, like it's kind of crazy. Another variety I would really like to recommend you guys, it's a miniature one, it's Tracianum. That one has one of the nicest fragrance I think I've ever seen in an orchid. So just do your research on the different types and classes of Cymbidium orchids, and I'm sure there's one that would make you very happy. They're really quite beautiful. Okay, I'll get into watering in one sec. So, they have kind of fleshy roots. These guys do not like drying up. This one I'm going to water right now. And they are fussy with their water, so they don't like fluoridated, chlorinated water. So be careful if you use tap water. I actually made that mistake here, and I don't know if you can see this leaf's going yellow, but they're definitely picky about their water. So I'd recommend distilled water, spring water, or rainwater. That all kind of works well. A little bit of a trick here. So you want to have good drainage, but a thicker medium than other orchids, and you want to keep it consistently moist. They resent drying out. I don't know why. Even in the winter, I find they do not like to dry out. If you absolutely want to repot or divide your cymbidium, it's best to do that after the bloom spike has turned yellow. You want to cut the bloom spikes off first, for sure, and then feel free to divide then. You'd never want to divide these guys when they're in full bloom. All your blooms will fall off, and you're probably going to delay blooming for a couple of years. So a little bit more to speak of on the floral morphology of these guys. They have these really fleshy sepals and petals. Cymbidiums have 2 lateral sepals, which you can see here, and they have a really cool throat. So cymbidiums are very strikingly colored. All the reproductive parts are going to be in the middle here. This is where you find your pistil, your stigma, and all of that. And just another thing to note, this part in the middle is called the labellum. It's typically the most striking part of a Cymbidium orchid flower. All of these petals are, sepals are typically the same color. A lot of them will have a blushing midrib on the bottom of the back of the flower, so that's another thing to mention. And they have kind of a flare at the tip of this peduncle, so that's this structure below the flower. And they typically have a bit of a waxy sheath. If you rip that off, it becomes kind of a clear separation, and it typically is colored brown in a lot of Cymbidium orchids. So Cymbidium orchids will produce these bracts underneath the floral inflorescence. They're just protective tissue. It's just something that kind of happens as they unravel to protect them from insect damage. This is your first sign that your bloom bud's gonna, or your inflorescence is gonna go. So they'll get black ridges. This is totally normal, but that's kind of your indication that, hey, you know, the plant has put enough energy into this big, beautiful cluster of flowers. It's time to rest soon. But as I said, you know, they're long-lasting flowers. Once this appears, you can still potentially have flowers for a couple of weeks. Yeah, cymbidiums are so beautiful. I mean, I'm just looking at this right now. Like, in comparison to my hand, this thing is huge. Yeah. So once again, pertaining to the botany of these guys, there's two main sections of cymbidiums. They're himantophyllum, which are typically lower dangly single flowers, and then there's ostrocymbidiums, which are group flowers. So those are the ones that have the big, huge inflorescences like this. And there are exceptions. There's also section cymbidium, which is more showy ones. But just to give you a little bit of a heads up, if you're looking for a specific type of cymbidium, I really do recommend doing your research on different varieties and classifications because there's so many to choose from. There's so many different cymbidium varieties. Like, it's really quite incredible. Oh, I don't think I actually said why they're called boat orchids. So they're called boat orchids because of the shape of this labellum. When they grow near streams in their wild habitats, these will actually float down streams and stuff. And I don't know if that's specifically just a coincidence or if they just named it because of the actual shape of the labellum, but that is why these guys are called boat orchids. So the Cymbidium genus was first described in 1799, so it's been around for a while. The actual genus name, which is Cymbidium, it actually is Latin for little boat shape, which is quite fitting. Yeah. Yeah, so as far as distribution goes, Cymbidiums are native to a lot of southern Asia, tropical Asia, parts of northern Australia, think Queensland for example. Cymbidiums are native to subtropical, higher altitude places. They're definitely not like super humid, like Malaysian lowlands tropical. They're definitely more of a cooler tropical plant. You'll find that a lot of these are actually native to the Philippines, specifically southern reaches of the Philippines. There are a couple varieties of Cymbidiums that are native to Japan. You'll find that some of the larger blooming ones, like a lot of these standards, are actually native to lower elevations, and then you'll find a lot of the miniature ones, the ones that are smaller flowered, more fragrant, are typically found in more highland areas. So trying to think, pest pressures are pretty low. I mean, look at that, you guys, like, wow. The way that the sun just like shines through them is actually insane. They're not heavy feeders. I find that they're definitely, if you want to really accentuate their bloomers, you're going to want to keep them crowded, you're going to want to keep them evenly moist, not drying out. And I mean, liquid feed fertilizer like every once in a while, like any generic fertilizer, even Miracle-Gro. But not very frequently. They're not heavy feeders by any means. I gotta turn the camera around in fluorescence because this is absolutely stunning. And there's lots of online resources on Cymbidiums too. There's some really talented people on YouTube that I really recommend checking out. This video is more oriented as a bit of an introduction to these guys. There's so much to know about the world of Cymbidiums. I don't even really know where to begin to start, so forgive me, this video is kind of jumbled. But yeah, Cymbidiums, boat orchids, 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 actually. Have a great day, you guys. If I missed anything, let me know. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and stay blessed.